Good morning. It is July 3rd, 2015. Gretchen Bronson here from Your Paleo Healthcare. And I have my good friend, Kate Towler. I want to say Kate Towler because of how her last name is spelled, but I keep adding an E, and there's not an E. I've got Kate on today for my first webinar series interviews to talk about autism. Kate has a background in autism. She herself has a diagnosis in it, and she has recovered from autism following the protocols that Jack Kruse explains on his website. And so, Kate, I'd like to turn it over to you, let you introduce yourself and say hello to everybody, and just give us a slight, short background about yourself.
Sure. Hello. As promised, here is our autism video. Hopefully we can slam it out in one, but it might end up being two. And we hope to do at least a second video for question and answer type thing. So when you have a question after you watch the whole entire kit and caboodle, just comment below, and hopefully we can get enough questions to make a question and answer type thing. On the Jack Kruse forum, I'm under Mr. Pinkies. You can go to the success stories, and generally I think my story is generally towards the top. It's the one that has 17,000 plus views on it. It's pretty hard to miss. But at any rate, as promised, here we are.
So Kate recently did a webinar with Ruben Salinas, and she talked about her success with her weight loss.
Yes.
Kate used to be obese, extremely obese.
Yep.
And she lost tons of weight following Jack Kruse's protocols.
Yep.
And her goal was to lose weight. A secondary effect was you saw some changes in your autism symptoms.
Yes.
So before we get into those changes, let's just stop for a moment. Let's talk about what is autism.
Very good question. We see a lot of on the forum different news articles and posts and that sort of thing, and so this is from my perspective and what I've learned about it and that sort of thing. And this is actually explained in my success story, but very quickly. So there's three huge categories, right? There's the social interaction, there's the repetitive behavior, and there's the communication. Okay, so you have three huge categories. And under those categories are little tiny subcategories, and subcategories of those subcategories, and subcategories of those subcategories. And each subcategory is a very specific skill set.
So can you give us an example, like with you?
Sure. Well, not with me in general, but a very good example is, under communication with babies, you think of eye contact. Does the baby make eye contact? The subcategories are arranged by age, and each year that you get older, a new set of skills are required of you. So you go to the pediatrician and they say, is your baby tracking? Is it watching things go by? Is your baby looking at you?
So like when they ask, when I took my kids to the pediatrician and we hit certain age markers or milestones.
Right.
Does your child respond when you call them by name? Do they look at you? Do they turn your head?
Yes.
Mine have reached the age where I call their name and they've acquired selective listening skills.
Right. And so So there's hundreds of subcategories, very specific skill sets in these huge three categories, right? So so how many gaps you have, so missing skill sets that you have in each three categories determines the severity of the autism. So separate from the autism, however, I'm not talking about sensory issues. Sensory issues is not a part of autism. We'll get into the gut issues and the GI tract issues, and we'll talk about those things later on down the road. But that's the gist of it. And there's a saying in the autism community that if you met one child with autism, you've only met one child with autism. And meaning each person has missing skill sets. They're all different. But the general problem of communication, social interaction, and repetitive behavior is all the same. And that's why it's a big, huge spectrum.
So kind of to give an analogy into not necessarily traditional diseases, but diseases that I'm familiar with, I have PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome. You can have PCOS, and there are different qualifications that determine whether you have that disorder.
Right.
You don't have to have all of them. You can have 1, 2, 3, 4. You can have all of them.
Yeah.
Or you can just have one or two pieces, such as, facial skin and heavy periods and not being able to get pregnant. You don't necessarily have to have cysts to qualify for polycystic ovary syndrome. So autism is the same way. You may have 5 kids in your child's classroom, or you may have 5 kids that are friends with your child. And they all may be on the autism spectrum, but they all have they all present differently with different symptoms in those 3 categories. One of the things in my job on a daily basis, we call categories beer cans. So we put things in the beer cans because we do everything graphically for my clients, and they like cylinders in their pictures, so I call them beer cans. So I bin things in beer cans. I'm sure a wine glass or a margarita glass would probably be nicer. They don't. The folks I work with, they're simple. So that's really we're talking about here when we talk about autism is no one individual has the same presentation of autism, and though they may have the same diagnosis, and then that diagnosis is adjusted on that scale depending on how many of those items you check off. Is that correct?
Right. And here's the kicker, okay? There's 2 huge points that I need to make here, and I want to make it crystal clear and so everybody hears this. Is that number 1, the testing for autism is only 15 years old. So, when we were kids, they didn't have that testing. And had they had that testing, there would have been no question. And again, we'll go into that once we get into the history and that sort of thing. But second of all, the criteria and the definition of autism has changed dramatically over the years. And so that's why I get very annoyed when I see, when I hear friends talking about autism like Rain Man. My kid's not Rain Man. Okay, the percentage of, so when we talk about the rate of autism and that sort of thing, it's like 1 in 68 or whatever. Please understand that is like the entire spectrum. To be on the very severe end of things, it's like 1 in 270 some odd kids still.
So then I'm going to ask a question.
Sure.
Back when autism was first being diagnosed, when we started to categorize it, what was the definition of autism then versus now?
Now, you talk to adults that are, say, 40 and above, and the majority of them that I have talked to, and again, I will talk about going to Lansing and talking to the state and the House of Representatives and the Senate. I'll get to that. But the majority that I've talked to thought that autism is mental retardation. And it's not. It's nowhere near that. Now, I liked how you explained your beer can analogy that, it's autism now has like this checklist, and you have to have so many checked in each category to qualify for the diagnosis. Under this new definition, that's all of 2 years old now. Asperger's, which is no longer exists technically. It's just high functioning autism.
Okay.
And so they've tried to clarify the definition and the criteria and that sort of thing to help the rate. Yeah, it's one of those things that it is snowballing and it's not stopping. So yeah.
As we talk about this, for those people who don't have children who are on the autism spectrum, for those adults who aren't on the autism spectrum, what type of doctors do you work with?
Well, that is another great question because, these kids do grow up. They do become adults physically, whether we ignore the entire issue of autism and they're like, oh, they're fine, and ignore the problems. And that's kind of the point about early intervention, especially with therapy and that sort of thing, is that the longer that you wait, a new set of skills are required of you, and you're that much further behind, and it's a race against the clock.
So
let me explain that.
Sorry.
So it's okay. I get distracted so easily. So
okay.
So if you have a 3-year-old that is mainly mentally 1 year old, in a year you gain a year's worth of skills. Okay, so the kid is now 4, but really is 2. Next year you gain 2 years worth of language, so you're now 5, and you're 4. You technically have to go beyond the actual age range to get caught up. So it's a race against the clock.
Right.
But the thing that caught me about Jack Kruse is that even though you have different skill set missing in each category, it still affects the same part of the brain, and the leptin prescription, CT, getting back to nature. We'll talk about all the things that we've done that are part of Jack Kruse's protocols and that sort of thing. It's a one-size-fits-all thing. I am a firm believer when it comes to autism, it's not an n=1 per se. It's you do it all or.
It's with autism. It's almost when you're following Jack Kruse's protocols. It's an all or nothing to achieve success.
It's an all or nothing approach, and so we'll go into depth about that later.
So. Going back to my question on the doctors.
Sure.
So you're working with if you have children, you're working with the physician. You're working potentially with a speech therapist, with an occupational therapist.
So Gretchen, I'm going to get a lot of hate mail about this.
That's okay.
So I have a very long list of haters. Okay, so I'm going to be blunt about this. Going to the primary care physician is like going to a foot doctor for a shoulder problem. Okay, I don't want to offend anyone, and it's not to be taken personally, but because the definition has changed so much, and you know with especially like with Ryan, everybody on this God green earth said I was insane. Like they thought I was nuts, and I had to be the squeaky wheel to just have him tested.
Right.
And so
that's the role of a mom. That is a role we as mothers, and I think this is where it's really important as a mom, as a patient, for even just for yourself. You have to advocate for yourself. And sometimes when you advocate, you're told, you don't know what you're talking about, you're not right. You get doctors and experts, people whose job it is to help us. But the reality is they don't know you, they don't know your child. You know, as a parent, we know what's best for our children based upon instincts. And those instincts we get from nature. Nature is telling us there's something wrong. We need to help our children. And so we pursue it. And I think that's really important. I mean, that's one of the things I advocate for is you are your own advocate. There is only one person who can advocate for you and your family. It's you. The doctor isn't going to do it. Mm-hmm. And I can understand why people may sit there and say, well, you've got it wrong, Kate, but you've worked this in your environment and you know what works for you and your family. This is just one example that people can take away. And what I would like is people to take hope that if you apply Jack's principles, you will see change in results, and amazing results at that. Whether you have autism or whether you have polycystic ovary syndrome or type 2 diabetes, you can fix yourself. But it requires sacrifice and not going with the flow of society. Yeah.
And that's kind of the hard part. I have been banned from, I want to say, 9 autism websites on Facebook. The autism community does not like me.
Well, and you know what?
At all. But you know what? I mean, the more that we work on Jack Kruse and his protocols, and we work on environment. Now, environment is going to be a big, huge topic throughout this, and so is light. The crazier things get, because for me, my goal was the weight loss, but I didn't realize how all of this would affect autism and sensory issues and that sort of thing. And I think that was icing on the cake for us. But at the same time, it makes me want to shake people and say, this is the conversation we need to have.
This works.
This works. There's no crazy pills. We'll get into that again. But this is the conversation we need to have, because there are so many different conversations going on about autism that it actually hurts the cause rather than helps the cause.
Yeah.
So
I think we kind of have we have an understanding, a basic understanding of what autism is. Mm-hmm. So I guess, if you have autism, how does it affect you? Or, if your child has autism, how does it affect them, and how does it affect their relationship within the family, and then the social dynamics? What are those effects of having autism?
Oh, well, that dives into the history of things. You know what? Let's go ahead and dive into the kind of the history of things, because I think that will lead into the story quite nicely of that sort of thing.
Okay, well, let's go ahead.
I kind of want to start off with, something that Ruben said to me during the last interview. He said, you peel back the layers of someone's success to see how they got there, and that sort of thing, and no one likes it. And it's kind of a bittersweet kind of thing, and how they, how they got there. And so, with that said, I am a mama bear, and this is kind of, it's personal. It's my family. It's my life, and I'm willing to share in that sort of thing. My mother is schizophrenic, and and so when I was born, I was immediately taken away, and I lived with my grandmother for a few months, and then I was adopted into a big family, and I really did not talk, or babble or anything until I was pretty close to 6 years old. The language that I did have was echolalia, so that means I repeated back, things that I hear. But and you know what? Funny story time, because we got to lighten things up, right? Okay, so when Brian, he was probably, I would say he was like 4 years old, and this was before Jack Kruse time, but a perfect example of echolalia. We were at my parents' house, and my parents have these standard sized poodles that are like waist high. They're
big.
They're big, right?
Yeah.
And Ryan is very tall and skinny, but he was like eye level with these dogs at that point. And we were teaching Ryan, keep off. Like you just say keep off, and the dogs will go and lay down and not be in your face if you don't like it. So I don't know, some time goes past, like a few weeks, and girlfriend calls me and says, hey, let's go out for lunch. And I'm like, yeah, but I'll have my kids with me. Like I just, kids will be with me. So she's like, hey, that's cool. I haven't seen them. I was like, yeah, okay. So we get to the restaurant, and Ryan is sitting there, and he's like coloring circles, circle, circle, circle. And the waitress comes up and says, hey, sweetheart, what would you like to drink, milk or chocolate milk? And I like look at her and I'm like, yeah, he doesn't like chocolate. He'll have regular milk. Well, apparently she didn't hear me, and she gets like, 2-3 inches away from Ryan, and he's sitting there coloring, just ignoring her. Like that's what he's focused on, right, is coloring those circles. And honey, you want milk or chocolate milk? And I'm like, lady, did you not hear me? Like, he wants regular milk. Well, third time she kind of touched his arm and was like, honey, you want milk or chocolate milk? And he whipped around, and if looks could kill, this lady would have been long gone. But he screamed, keep off, Oscar. And the whole place went silent, except for me. I was on the ground laughing hysterically. And this woman pops up. She's like, who's Oscar?
But that gives an example of how autism affects people, Yeah. So it shows the effect of Ryan's focus, what Ryan was doing, Ryan's ability to not only receive communication but return it and participate in that social setting. The waitress was expecting a typical 4-year-old response, and she was, kudos to her and what she was doing in her job is engaging a young child who normally would not have been asked in that environment, because most waiters and waitresses are always going to ask mom and dad.
Yeah.
I mean, so unfortunately, she got the response she was not expecting.
Yeah, you're in my space, lady, and kind of like the dogs were in Ryan's space, and so he took that phrase and placed it into a different situation. Like, hey, lady, you're in my space. Keep,
Right. He at least he had the cognitive awareness to know. No, I have my 16 inches of square space around me. I have my bubble. Stay out of it. And so when we talk about your history, you had a similar type of language development as well? Okay.
Yeah. And so had they had the autism testing that they have now, there wouldn't have been any questions back then. But they didn't. And so
so you were just she just doesn't talk. She's not a talker.
Yep. So they put me in speech and OT and a few other therapies just in the school system. And so growing up was tough. And then when middle school hit, and middle school is awful for anybody.
Middle school, I think school in general is hard because kids are not nice to each other. I mean, we're not nice to each other as adults. So put it down into a little kid level where you just want to be friends with everybody. You want to have friends, and you want to play. You want to be a part of something. You want to engage. You want to socialize.
Right.
I can remember with my daughter Chaos. Picking her up one day from school, after school program, and I'd taken the bus to work that day, and I got off and I was going to walk home with her, and as I was walking up to school, she was outside on the playground, and an older kid, about a third grader, came up to her, because Chaos is little. She's the smallest one in her class, and even in her new school, kindergartners are bigger than she is. She's just tiny. And this older girl said, you don't get to play with us because you're just a baby. You're just a kindergartner. We don't want to be your friend. And it hurt her feelings. And, I watched her break down in tears. And as a mom, you sit there and you're like, oh, this kills me. And you got to have that talk. Well, sometimes, honey, not everybody is going to want to be your friend. Not everybody's going to want to play with you. That's just the way life is. And guess what? You're better off without him. We walked in, we picked up her stuff, and as we were leaving, this other little girl who, probably third or fourth grade, was walking by, and Chaos walked up to her and is like, tapped her on her shoulder and says, you know what? You're mean. And I decided I don't want to be your friend and I don't want to play with you because you're not nice to other people. Girl turned around and walked out. I'm like, she's got this. But I think for somebody who has a child who has autism, that capability isn't there, is it?
No, and I spend a lot of time, in talking with Kruse especially. I spend a lot of time thinking about what is being said to me in the tone of voice and my facial expression, especially, like, it's usually like everybody's like, why are you so mad? And I'm like, I'm mad.
Wait. Otherwise known as resting bitch face.
Yes! Right here. And I have to make effort, to think about how other people feel. And, autism is a very selfish thing. It's my repetitive behavior is ballet. I love it. That is my dream. That's what I want to do. And sometimes you have to sit there and kind of divide your time equally, but left it up to me, I'd like to do my own thing. But yeah, I have to spend a lot of time digesting things that are said to me and how they're said to me and body language and my own body language. It's not a natural response thing that for most people, you see someone crying and you automatically go and give a hug and say, what's the matter? And that is something like I see someone crying and it's like, okay. And, I go on my, I don't necessarily sit there and.
So those social cues that those of us who don't have autism, we take for granted, you don't have those. Your kids don't have those. And you have to develop, you almost have to teach coping mechanisms to be able to read that. And that one-on-one interaction of learning what those facial cues mean is probably really, really important.
Yeah, and in the forum there's I remember last week, or maybe it was I don't know, someone posted about one of the scientists of autism shots and that sort of thing being murdered or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, this makes me thrilled and happy, and everybody thought I meant like because he died. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that. And you were talking about
and I had to go back and clarify.
One of the biggest challenges in autism that becomes, it's almost like it's a red flag. That the vaccines are always spoken about as the root cause when we're not talking about what the root cause is. It's our environment. And I think that's the biggest challenge is, when we look at this as moms specifically, it's hard to understand that the environment we lived in and that we were born in is what exactly influences our children's illnesses. And that's a hard pill to swallow because I look at my kids and I know that their medical issues are the result of my epigenetic influences from before birth, when I was just a little egg in my mom's ovary sacs, on back to my grandmother's environment and her grandmother's environment. I can't change that. But that transgenerational epigenetics has been passed on to my children. And I think as a mom, that's one of the hardest things to accept, that sometimes, we talk about not wanting to face reality, inconvenient truths. Well, the inconvenient truth is your children's medical issues are related to your mitochondrial epigenetics as a mother, because mitochondria are passed down through the maternal line. And that's a mind-boggling thing when you really think about it. From a parental perspective, my children's health is the result of me and what I did in my 30s, in my 20s, in my teens, when I was 2. I didn't, but you don't know that. And when you do know that, it can be very frustrating for moms, I think, to know that my epigenetics have translated to my children's. Everybody's like, well, it's the genetics, it's genetics. No, it's the environment. Yep. The environment turns on those genes. And our environment today isn't what it used to be. And we don't, how many people spend all day indoors and they never get outside? I mean, when I'm working, I spend 8 hours a day inside. Yesterday I spent 4.5 hours on a telephone call on Skype. 4.5-hour Skype call on the computer. I was at home. I did get about a 45-minute break, and I was able to go outside for about 15-20 minutes before I had to go back and continue my prep work for the next 2.5 hours. But still, we all spend all day inside. We no longer get outside. We pay other people to mow our lawns. We pay, we don't even like going outside to, spend time with kids because we're worried about Lyme disease and ticks and mosquitoes and West Nile. And malaria and all these other things, which really shouldn't matter. We should just get out and stop living inside. But I mean, that kind of takes us, totally off tangent. But, it comes down to the fact that when you're inside, you're not involved with what's really going on, and you can't get the right signals.
Yeah. And you're talking to the ultimate indoor cat. And so to go back to the history. So my mom has schizophrenia. My mom was adopted. Her mom was adopted. Her mom was. It goes back about 5 or 6 generations of adoptions there. On my biological father's side, I don't know because I was one night stand. And then, so it's, but I feel like, again, schizophrenia and autism and that sort of thing, again, we're talking about the same brain functions and the environment and so on and so forth. Now, on Kruse's side of the family, even though Asperger's is technically no longer, I'm just going to say it's all through his family. There is no question. Kruse is a spitting image of his father and his grandfather, and it's all through his family, but there was never a label to it. So, and when Kruse was a kid, the famous question is, what's the difference between, autism and Asperger's? And the difference from my point of view is that people that are in the very high functioning, Asperger's, they generally have repetitive behavior and social interaction, social issues. Excuse me. But they generally do not have communication issues. So Kruse,
so they just so essentially, someone who may have been on formerly the Asperger's, now high functioning autism, would be somebody they're kind of awkward in social settings. They're really good at maybe math or music or engineering or computer programming. They've got a very focused area that they're really, really good in, and but when you put them in that social environment, the wrong thing comes out at the wrong time. They think it's funny, but it's really not, and you're like, ooh, awkward.
Yeah.
And but those are, then again, there are other people who are not on the autism spectrum who are just plain awkward in public, and you're like, it's cringeworthy. And you when somebody's, somebody who sits on the high functioning autism spectrum, and they're awkward because that's who they are. But then you have the person who's just awkward because they're forcing it in a public relationship, and you're just like, yeah, I don't know what to do with you.
Yeah, he's, speaking about, he's the guy at work that just does what he's supposed to. He won't go any further than that, and every time you try to talk to him, he's talking about some classic car from the 1960s, and that's all you get out of him.
I think it's one of those things. Is like, in today's society, everybody's got to be multitasking and being capable of doing like 15,000 things at once. When the reality is, it's just being able to focus on a single task and accomplishing it effectively and efficiently is something that's really important, and we forget that. And I think people like Kruse highlight how important it is that we need to not be as distracted as we can be at times. So I don't know.
So at any rate, I get into adulthood, and Kruse and I meet, and
I love the story of how you meet. I really do. I think it's a really wonderful story, and you should share that.
Well, Chris and I met through a mutual friend, and we just kind of liked each other better than the mutual friend. And uh, yeah, so we started just hanging out. And the sad truth is that I went through a very violent sexual abuse incident, and all Chris wanted was to be my friend, and he just wanted to hang out, and there was no pressure or anything like that, and I didn't have a lot of help from my parents, mainly because they didn't know what had happened or what was going on and that sort of thing. And Chris took me to all of my appointments and all of my therapy appointments, and he paid for my medications, and had the psychiatrist, had I been more open with him, he wouldn't have put me on Depakote or Wellbutrin or a lot of the
traditional drugs that are
drugs for the guy thought I was bipolar, and I really don't blame him for one day I was like, hey, I was like fast speaking and just jittery and like and the next thing he knew I was sobbing, crying, but he really didn't understand why, and I was just really off kilter.
Well, when you're recovering from something like that, it's something that's very, very difficult. First off, to process mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and second, I love Chris for how amazing he is as an individual, as your friend, as your husband, as your lover, as a father. He's just amazing. And then third, when you sit down with psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, they want to peer into your lives, and they want to talk about things, and they want to understand what happened and make everything better by talking about it. And I've written about my own experiences with PTSD, and how, for me, talking about those things, it's like reliving it, and it brings up those experiences again. So you get put on medications that are appropriate for what's going on, when all you want is someone to help teach you how to cope. Yeah. And I think, Chris was there. Chris helped you cope in a way that I don't think any medical practitioner can, in some instances. And
Chris sat through 5 years worth of sexual abuse therapy, and we again, we do a lot of things together, but he's an exceptional gem in the world. And
one thing that I want to highlight is that you can be somebody with autism who has, or you can have a child who is someone with autism who may not have the same social skills that you would expect from someone who's not on the autism spectrum, but compassion and caring and loving and respect are still within that individual. And that's very important, because respecting and loving somebody for who they are is sometimes the best medicine you can give someone.
Yeah. That's how I gained my weight. I gained my weight in a very short period of time, being on wrong medications and, going through therapy. afterwards I would just stuff my face. It was
because therapy didn't help you. It made you feel worse, and all you didn't have another outlet.
Yeah.
For fixing it. You need dopamine to feel better, and when you don't have the normal avenues for dopamine, you find food, you find alcohol, you find destructive behaviors. And I myself was on Depakote for bipolar disorder and Topamax and a bunch of other stuff. And, I gained like 60 pounds on that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I had a toxic reaction to it. Drugs are not always the best or should be the first defense.
It really, really should be like the last resort.
Yeah.
Thing. So at any rate, we got married after 6 years of dating, and probably 9, 10 months after we got married, I got pregnant with Ryan. And Ryan, with his, during that time that he was in my belly and being pregnant with him, I had this instinct, especially when I found out that it was going to be a boy, that something was not right, something was wrong. But I had a wonderful pregnancy with Ryan. Like, I was never sick. Okay, there was one time that I smelled cheese and I puked in my fridge. That's a really funny story that I'll tell someday. But I had a really good pregnancy, but I had this instinct that something just wasn't right. And, I got up to past 300 pounds with my pregnancy. So I was overweight. And let's talk about environment. I lived in a trailer park that was trailer on top of trailer on top of trailer, right?
Right.
And on one side of the wall in the living room was our Wi-Fi router with my desk and everything. Like, I had the gadgets of all gadgets there in one corner. And on the other side of the wall was my bed. So I was zapped, and then my diet was like crap. Okay, we discussed that in the other video.
I gotta sit there and say that I think at every, everybody's diet is crap these days. I mean, we sit and we think we're, we follow the Food and Drug Administration guidelines, the food pyramid, the food plate. We've been eating the wrong things for 30, 40 some years now because of bad research, and we're still doing bad research. Mm-hmm. I too was eating bad food when I was pregnant with Chaos, and the cell phones and the Wi-Fi and.
Oh, I lived on McDonald's, honey. I mean, McDonald's and pizza is all I ate. Okay, but at any rate. At 39 weeks, I had my OBGYN appointment, and I jokingly said that and I don't know if people get my humor, or I think they get my humor when they don't get, I don't know when people get my humor, okay, whatever. But I jokingly said that I wanted to be done, and she accidentally broke my water. So I went to the hospital, was induced, and, I went through probably close to 35 hours of labor, and I pushed for 2 hours, and they said, you have two options. Option A is, push for another 2 hours and have a C-section, or, have a C-section now. And I said, well, gee, I think I'll have that C-section now. I was exhausted at that point. because once you go to the hospital, you're not allowed to eat. They give you sugar water through the vein, and
it's so amazing how much we've medicalized birth. We've lost touch with nature on it, and I can relate to what you're talking about because I had 2 of my own labors. And the first was 39 hours of unassisted, natural labor, no medications. But I was so dehydrated that I was physically unable to labor. They had to move me to the hospital. Yeah. And fortunately I had a really good doctor who was like, well, let's get you some rest. Let's get you on an epidural. Let's give you some Pitocin and get things moving and move forward. And, at 6 hours later, she came in and she's like, well, if things don't start progressing, you're going to have a C-section. And I was able to say, give me another hour. Another hour later, I was at 9 centimeters. And she's like, all right, take your time.
Yep.
I got patients this afternoon, so anytime after 5 would be great, but just go ahead and rest. 6 o'clock, by 6 o'clock, I had chaos. But that was 39 hours of natural labor with another 12 hours thereafter. So, I will sit there and say with Havoc, I had 12 hours of labor and then there was something wrong. I knew there was something wrong. I went to the hospital. I knew I was getting a C-section. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. There was something wrong, and it was something that was wrong with me, not with him. He was fine. There was something wrong with me.
Well, Ryan's heartbeat tanked, and so in the middle of prepping me, they barely made it to the operating room, and they realized that Ryan was stuck in my pelvis, and so it took them about 40 minutes or so to get him unstuck. And the precious sound of screaming because my nerves just. Healthy boy, and he was great. He was a great baby. He, by 2 months he was sleeping through the night and he was happy and he babbled and he met all of his milestones and that sort of thing. And probably right around 12 months, he just, he stopped smiling and he stopped babbling and his face just went completely straight. And again, I didn't know anything about autism or the signs of autism or anything like that. And finally, I kind of mentioned this to primary care and just like, you're fine. He's doing beautifully. You're worried over nothing. Well, Chris, going back to the subject of, you leave me to my own devices and I do what I want kind of thing. And
you're dangerous when unsupervised. Is that what you're telling us, Kate?
Yeah. No, I am. And I kind of put my foot down with Chris. I needed help. I couldn't do the grocery shopping. I couldn't take care of Ryan. I need help. And it wasn't that Chris was a bad father or anything. He just needed direction. He just needed direction and communication of how I felt and what my needs were. And I said, if you can't call on the phone to order pizza, or if you can't go to the grocery store, because going to the grocery store, there's so much to look at, so much noise, so much people around that, maybe you should, go talk to someone about it, And so the third session in, they're like, yeah, you have Asperger's. So that's when Chris was diagnosed, and
it's kind of like, oh, so that explains it. Okay, now I understand.
And Chris had this huge, like, revelation of, like, the world did not center around him kind of thing. And his life was so clear, crystal clear. And Chris and I went through a really rocky time period because he went off on his own thing about, his diagnosis and what it meant. And there was religious confusion, which is a whole thing we're not even gonna get into. But he started to feel guilty because he felt like, oh my God, like Ryan is going after my footsteps and modeling my behavior and that sort of thing. And then he's like, oh wait, I actually have a diagnosis of autism and that sort of thing. Could Ryan possibly be, exactly like me? And the thing is that, we went back to our primary care and said, look, Dad has been diagnosed. Now do you believe us? And they're like, oh, okay, all right. So we wasted a good 6-8 months there.
Well, and this just highlights how important, it goes back to my earlier point, that you've got to advocate for yourself as a patient, advocate for your children. When you don't get an answer that's right or that you don't think is right, it's always good to ask the question in a different way. When you still get the same answer, then it's time to find a new doctor. Mm-hmm. And what's unfortunate is, I think you've got the trend that's been going on for the past 15 years or so, where we medicate children when they're not behaving properly in school or at home, when the reality is maybe medication isn't the right tool. Maybe there are other things we should be looking at.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you sit and you stop and you go, okay. And I think for you guys, just all that you've been through, Chris's self-discovery of, okay, now he understands why he is the way he is. And, when you're going through something like a self-discovery after you just have a new baby, it's very stressful on not only mom and dad, but the family as a unit, because now it's not just mom and dad, it's mom, dad, and baby. And then you have this self-discovery, which is like, oh, wow, I understand me more. And, for you, that was a stressor because it was hard for you to just manage all that. And you were managing the fact that something's wrong with my baby and nobody's listening to me. Yeah. And you feel helpless.
Yeah. And, squeaky wheel gets the oil. And finally, we went the route of going to the schools. And at 18 months, there's a program in Michigan called Early On. So then we went to the University of Michigan Autism Center, Communication Center, and Ryan received his full diagnosis at 18 months. And so we went through part of their, they had different studies going on, so we were a part of their studies for a little while. And then, boom! Congratulations, Kate, you're pregnant again. And I'm like, yay, goody.
You never expect it, do you?
So, well, she was planned.
But even when they're planned, you never expect it because you're like, oh yeah, it's going to take like 6 weeks or 6 months or, oh shit.
I actually got pregnant the week before Ryan got diagnosed. At any rate, the diagnosis process, I kind of want to talk about that a little bit because many people don't they don't know what it entails. It's on our end, on the family's end. It's a 40-hour, a literal 40-hour process. They give you a stack of papers. It's like yay thick. And you go through and they ask a ton of questions from, does your kid say cat? Does your kid say dog? Does your kid look at you? Does your kid, is your kid potty trained? Major questions. And then there's a parent interview that lasts between 3 and 5 hours long. There's a cognitive test. There's the ADOS test, which is the actual check-off list of do they have enough in each category to have the autism diagnosis.
So going through the diagnosis itself is a full-time job.
Yeah.
Doing the paperwork, going to the appointments, getting Ryan to those appointments, and we, if he was 18 months at the time, I mean, how do you explain a 5-hour test to an 18-month-year-old that doesn't have a communication capability at that point?
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be a challenge. I mean, I can't even relate to that.
And they do, 18 months, it's a parent interview, so, it only required us, so we left Ryan with grandparents and that sort of thing. And the child testing is much shorter type deal. And then weeks after they analyze, the poor bastard who has to go through all of the paperwork and what was said at the parent interview and the testing and that sort of thing.
You mean the grad student? It's probably some poor grad student.
Yeah, and at the end, you go through, probably around a 15-page review of everything that was said and the test results and that sort of thing, and then they give you your diagnosis, and they're like, good luck to you. And then we'll see you in 2 years with your next. And I'm like...
So you have to go through this diagnosis process...
every 3 years.
Okay, every 3 years.
Well, let me explain that. Here in Michigan, most of the insurance companies, even though autism is a lifelong thing, require you to go through a whole brand new diagnosis every year to qualify for services. And again, that kind of goes into, okay, so that's kind of where we're at the story now. At this time, period of time, we go through a diagnosis and that sort of thing. We were lucky enough to be a part of a study, and the study is the diagnosis process. So our diagnosis was free of charge because they wanted to bring kids in and go through this whole entire process. And of course, they screen you first to make sure that you're kind of a candidate for it.
Right.
But I can tell you that if you pay out of pocket, these tests are, well over $2,000 a pop.
And you're paying for those without getting any reimbursement from insurance.
Right. And at that time, insurance companies did not pay for any services. They're like, good luck to you.
Right.
They didn't want to.
You parents have to. You have to pay for these. You have to pay for this care out of pocket. This is care you need, but it's care you're not receiving as part of your medical insurance. It's care you're not receiving because the medical insurance doesn't accept it. Some of the states don't accept it. I mean, So we're seeing progress, at least over these past years, that you're now seeing. States provide services, and even insurance companies are starting to provide some services. I know they're not covering all of it.
Well, here's the thing. We'll get into that a little bit later into the story here. So after the Ryan's diagnosis, we went the traditional route. We went with ABA therapy. Well, no, we just went with the schools for a while. And the schools, they're not equipped. Well, I shouldn't say all of the school districts are not equipped. There are some that are now. But autism touches every aspect of life. And so the schools care about, can you hold a pencil? Can you cut with scissors? Can you sit down and pay attention? Can you walk? Can you run? And they don't care. Can you take a shower? The self-care things. Can you use the restroom by yourself? So there is a bigger picture of things. So you can't just go to the schools and expect the schools to deal with this massive issue of autism.
Right. It's not something that it's just...
But it's not explained to you. Like there's no one book, there's no guidelines. They give you, here's your diagnosis and good luck to you. So we did nothing. Like we got speech and OT, occupational therapy through the school, and we flatlined. Like the gaps in Ryan's skills got bigger, and when he was 3.5, I sat down with the school and I said, "Look, we're going backwards here," and by 3.5, we decided to go through another diagnosis process to see where he's at and what we need to do. And so we went through a second diagnosis problem, and we, something has to change. And at this point, I was angry. And I think the main reason why I was angry was because at the time, I couldn't afford the therapies outside of what the school could provide. Now, to give you an idea of what it costs, ABA therapy, which is applied behavioral analysis, so behavioral therapy, costs anywhere between $4,000 and $7,000. I've seen as much as $10,000 per month per kid out of pocket. And then you add speech, OT, PT, doctor's appointments for kids that have GI tract issues, and so on so forth. It's all out of pocket. So you're talking between $5,000 and $10,000 per month per kid. And so I was on Facebook, and there was an article that talked about the possibility of, having a mandate for insurance companies to cover these therapies. And so I wrote this ridiculously long response about how it would affect our family and that sort of thing. And this nonprofit organization contacted me and said, we would like you to come to Lansing, which is the state capital here in Michigan, and talk to the House of Representatives and the House, because this is a bill that's actually up for a vote and that sort of thing. But they need to hear from you and how this would affect you and that sort of thing. And I had the opportunity to do so. And in doing that, I got to work with Eastern Michigan Autism Center, Collaborative Center, and I got to interview hundreds of families. And there was a few things that kind of shocked me about that experience. Number one, the mass majority, huge majority chunk of these families that I got to interview did not realize their kid had autism until the kindergarten entrance testing that we have here in Michigan, which is age
5. So you're already, if depending on what state you're in, or depending on the attention your pediatrician or your family practitioner pays attention to the mom or the dad or whoever is the primary caregiver who's saying there's an issue.
And by age 5, You're late to the party, friend. You are in deep
shit
at that point. Okay. Well, so let's talk about being a parent for a minute. Okay. So the goal of a parent, really, just the overall thing, how I view it is, okay, I don't want my kid living with me when they're 30. Okay, 21 hits, and that is.
You want them to be self-sufficient. You want them to be able to go out and live their lives. You want them to be stable and independent, functioning members of society.
Right.
Now, hey, if they go to college and they want to come back and pay me rent and live while they pay off their college loans, then fine. I mean, my parents had a rule, you're 18, you're out. You get a job, you go to college, you get a scholarship. At 18, you're gone.
And the crazy thing about the second diagnosis that we put Ryan through at 3.5 years old, they sat us down and said, cognitively, we're talking cognitive skills here. Ryan will be able to have a job or go to school full time. He will not be able to live on his own. And I'm like, wait.
Rewind.
Rewind. I'm sorry. Can you explain this to me again? And that is how they said it to me. They said, the way that this goes, at the rate that this is going, the change from 18 months to 3.5, Ryan will be able to have a job. He will not be able to live on his own.
And
so,
as a mom, you're going through this second diagnosis. You already have a second child who's an infant.
Yep.
Now, at this point in time, is Lizzie demonstrating any of those same things?
Lizzie scared the shit out of me more than Ryan did. Okay, so Lizzie, Ryan was 2.5 when Lizzie was born. And Lizzie did not squeak, she did not squeal, she did not scream, she did not babble. She took a vow of silence from birth. She did not like being held. She refused the breast. She lived in the swing. But even then, it had to be a gentle rock. She had more sensory issues than nerve-wracked.
And at the same time that this is going on, Ryan's getting reevaluated. You've been asked to testify before your state legislature regarding this bill that's going forward.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be completely overwhelming because you're going, I already have one child that has autism. I have one child that has autism. And my infant is already exhibiting behaviors my 2.5-year-old demonstrates. My 3-year-old demonstrates. And so I know what it's going to cost me to get my son to the point that he can have a job and live at home. What am I going to have to do for my daughter?
And with Lizzie, at 6 months, I went to the pediatrician and I said, I know she has autism. And he's like, no, okay, back up. She's 6 months old. And I'm like, yeah, she does. And, how I knew was she was not tracking. She wasn't watching things go by her. You drop a can of beans, she didn't even startle. She had absolutely no facial expressions. She had very, very little eye contact. And he's like, okay, no, don't even go there. Let's check her hearing. Let's check her vision. And I said, okay, I'm going to make a bet with you. If those come back normal, $50. I won that bet. Of course I won.
High five, Mama. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally won that bet. With Lizzie though, we put her in. We paid out of pocket. We paid speech, OT, 3 months of ABA for her, and by the time that she turned 3, Lizzie was well being around 6 years old, and then my 6 year old was like 2. Okay, so I had a younger child that was beyond her age range, and then my older was still far, far, far behind. And the heartbreak and that sort of thing just nearly killed me. But I have to say, Lizzie was probably the best thing besides the Jack Kruse stuff that I ever did for Ryan. Not that I had Lizzie for Ryan,
but the effort you did to at least get Lizzie to a point where she could function, where she could, because you're going, I just need her to be like Ryan.
Yeah.
At the time you started the therapy,
and the thing is that I had to sit there and choose between the main reason why I went to Lansing and fought for the mandatory to get insurance companies to pay for this was because I was sitting there trying to choose between my children who was going to get the therapy.
And you know what? No parent should have to do that. I mean,
I had them in tears. Okay, they got the point, and Michigan passed the bill, and then everything took a while to get up and running. But when again, a lot of hate mail over this, but when Obamacare took effect here in Michigan, Michigan used to be one of the worst places for autism families to live, and now we're one of the best.
This is a prime example. Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, whatever you want to call it, and I work in public policy. I work with the federal government. I've helped craft policy. No policy is perfect. No law is perfect. And
it's still not perfect now. I'm not saying that it is, but
it's not going to be perfect. It's not good for doctors. It's not good for
and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of still.
It's not good for patients and people who are trying to get services. But there's some really good things in that help people who are stuck between going, I have 2 children who need medical care, and I can only afford to give medical care to one.
Yeah.
Do I split it and do a half-assed job, or do I? And as a parent, that's so hard to sit there and say, who do I choose?
And that was the thing where everybody started crying, is because I said, okay, I actually said this to them. To the house. I'm like, okay, so please tell me which child deserves it, because I have a hard time choosing. And how I ended it was, eventually these kids grow up, and at the rates that autism is coming up, you're looking at boards of state. You're looking at group homes, and we don't have those things.
We don't have those things. We don't have the infrastructure to care for the medical things that are going on in normal people. And then you bring in people, adults and children and soon-to-be adults who are on the autism spectrum, and you're going, how do we care for this? It's a huge burden on society. If you provide the means to address it early on, and you can help them become functioning adults, so they can be contributing members of society, that just helps everybody. Yeah. And I think this is where you have to talk about, when you talk about the treatments, you've got those mainstream treatments, the therapies that you're spending. You're going in debt as a parent to help your child be able to function. And
I can tell you that between both kids, we have spent well over $75,000. And so, but at any rate, we had the second diagnosis with Ryan, and we decided that the schools were shitty and we needed to be closer to Chris's work and be in an area that, well, we had many issues like with the trailer and the mold and blah, 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 blah. So we moved to a tiny 2-bedroom apartment that was very crowded and that sort of thing. And by that time, I was well over 300 pounds and had been 300 plus. I got up to 325. I probably was bigger than that, but I was, I didn't want to come to grips with the situation that I was in with my health, and of course with PCOS and high blood pressure, and I honestly think that stress was going to, at that point, kill me.
I think we need to stop here, Kate, because this is a really important thing that I think we, as moms, we miss. We focus so much on our family, our children, our husbands, our parents, that we forget about that taking care of ourselves. That if we don't take care of ourselves, we may not be able to take care of our family because we're not here.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, what you did as far as taking control of your health, I think that probably had a huge impact on your being able to not only help your children, but continue to champion the cause of what you were trying to do with them. I think that's really important, and we need to highlight that because as moms, we forget, we don't put ourselves first sometimes, and we need to.
And what do they tell you when you're on an airplane? They say put on your own mask first, and then help everyone around you. And that's at that point where I got a personal trainer and I said this was it. And I had those talks with Ryan that things needed to change. And that's when we met Kruse in his forum and his website and information. So, Chris started on the food thing first, and then after a month, I followed. And then, I dropped a ton of weight, and again, we can refer back to the first podcast with Ruben where I go into detail about that. I don't want to spend too much time on that.
Right.
But, probably around February, Chris and I kind of looked at each other like, what are we doing? Like, why aren't we doing this, like, with our kids? And, like, because, okay, so now we're going to go into it, Gretchen. As parents, going from, infant to having them go into adulthood and being successful and that sort of thing, it is our job to show them what a healthy lifestyle is and what it looks like and what it means to. We are the gatekeepers at home. We do the grocery shopping. We set the rules. And, it is a lost art of cooking our meals and getting the recipes from our great-great-grandmothers that are probably,
long gone. I mean,
gone, and
it really is. I mean, when you sit down and you think about it, I mean, I have so many friends who have just as busy lives as I do. And, we all have different priorities. I'm not judging anybody here, but they go out to eat. Their food bill is spent on going out to dinner. They like to do that, and more power to them. We spend our food bill on good quality meat and seafood, and we cook every night. I mean, My kids go to bed at 9 o'clock at night. Not ideal. We're sitting down for dinner between 6:30 and 7:30 every night, especially now that we've got a longer commute. But every night they get a homemade meal. And, sometimes that homemade meal is me being lazy, and I admit it. Occasionally hot dogs show up on the menu. You know what? I like a good kosher hot dog every now and then. Because it's been that type of day, and I just don't want to deal with it. But then there are other days that my kids are getting fresh salmon.
And in our case, we cleaned out our fridges and we cleaned out our things, and we said this is the way that it has to be. And I'm gonna say it. When your kids are sick, and a lot of people will take offense that I view autism as a sickness, but when your brain does not function and those pathways are not connected or have never connected or they're disconnected, the point is to reconnect them or connect them for the first time. And I'm not saying food is the answer, because I will get into that in a minute, but there is no shading. It goes to all or nothing approach with us. And so again, we are the gatekeepers of what comes into our household. And when we presented this to grandparents, for example, I'm not going to say which side, my side or Chris's side, but if you read my success story, you'll get the gist. They immediately said, you're causing harm. You're going to cause harm to their livers. You're going to cause harm to their kidneys. Ketogenic version is this is not okay. They put their foot down. You're doing harm. And we said, you know what? We are the parents here. And my mama bear came out. Okay. I do not any longer let anyone come in between me and my kids. And if you don't like it,
fuck off.
Sorry. You know what I mean? They are my kids, my rules, my house. And you know what? We said goodbye to a lot of people and a lot of friends and a lot of family. And we said, you know what? If you want to come see our kids, we are not banishing you from our kids, but you come to our house. Do not bring food. Do not make food parts of gifts. And you follow our rules. Otherwise, no. You know.
This is a key point, because, hey, Jack's crazy. I mean, Jack talks about doing crazy stuff, and
Jack's nuts, but I love him.
Jack's off the wall crazy. And, if you followed my blog, if you followed my story, I've tried everything, and guess what? Crazy works. And there are lots of people that think Jack's version of crazy works. And, there's science behind it. It's new science that is being pioneered and that's out there. But sometimes you have to sever the ties with the people who are holding you back. And, that's a really hard thing to do when it's your parents. I mean, I can remember having a conversation with my mom, and I said, well, we've gone gluten-free, we've gone grain-free, we're not eating this way anymore, please don't feed the kids this. Well, my mom's response was, well, a little gluten won't hurt them, and I'm like, you don't know that.
And along those lines, in the very beginning, Chris and I had a wedding to go to, and we begged grandparents, please, just one night, we will pack all of their food. And they said, okay, we'll abide by what you send and whatever. And, they were there for less than 24 hours. Okay. We dropped them off at 3:00 in the afternoon, and we picked them up by, noon.
Right.
And, when we picked them up, Ryan was like, I don't feel good. like, okay, well, we had a long weekend. It was out of routine. And, he likes routine. He likes predictability. And he's set in his ways. So this was, it wasn't any surprise to me at the time that he, what was really going on. Well, so Friday night to Saturday, picked him up Saturday, Sunday morning, he woke up and head to toe in hives. And I have never felt so scared in my life because he was having trouble breathing and just hives and itching. And so after hour care, we went. Well, come to find out, okay, so I capped their carbs at between 10 and 15 carbs per day. And
now, how do you count carbs? Just so people who aren't familiar with how you eat and how I eat, when you talk carbs, are you talking starchy carbs? Are you talking sugars? Are you and fruit? Or are greens included in that?
So humans tend to fuck things up, Gretchen.
Amen. I do it all the time on my biohacks.
Okay. So humans tend to fuck things up, and I am brutally honest about this, especially in the form, and I hear supplement this and supplement that, and product this, and okay. Not
Stop.
in our house,
Just
okay?
stop.
Okay, so I can name you, on one hand, we have coconut oil, that's unrefined, coconut flour, mustard. That's it. That's all that's touched by a factory. That's all we have. Okay, everything else is fresh meat, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, fresh everything. I do not touch anything that comes from a factory. Why? Because, I don't know, there's like 48 different names for sugar. There's the
right.
Yeah. We could talk all day long about
right.
So back to the carb thing, okay? So you could never ever have enough green things in your life, okay? So broccoli, Brussels sprouts, I don't count those, okay? Okay, anything remotely starchy, sugar, fruit, that includes honey, dates, grapes, all that jazz, and anything touched by a factory, okay, goes into that 10 to 15 carbs. So that's one apple a day. Plus, they can have broccoli. They can have as much green things as they want. So when I hear Kruse, talk about like carbs, in my mind, he's talking about broccoli. You probably will laugh over this. Okay. There was one video of him. He's like, I eat so much broccoli, and yeah. I don't count anything green. Is the long of the short, but anything else other than that, I count towards the 10 to 15, and a lot. That's where I get a lot of resistance, especially with the weight loss thing. Is what do you count and what do you not count? And I say, here it is.
I have little people.
Little people.
I should have locked the door. They're like opening and closing and opening, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
The life of a mother. You can never find a quiet moment by yourself when they're in the house.
Well,
same goes for pets too. That hand coming underneath the bathroom door. Yep.
Yeah. So there's my gist on food, friends. Is anything prepackaged? It does not enter the doors of my home, and it is a rare occasion. Now there are times where yes, I make goodies for my kids. For example, a a big question I am asked is, well, what about school? And I'm like, well, okay, I sent in a letter stating Ryan is on the ketogenic version of the Paleolithic diet. All food and drink must come from home. End of story. And so I get these emails, hey, the kids are going to have cotton candy and popsicles. And I'm like, okay. So I make something equivalent and send it in with Ryan. So yeah, I occasionally make paleo cookies or paleo cake or whatever to substitute this. But I can tell you from, a very, it only took 2 or 3 weeks for Ryan to really realize what we were doing with our food and that sort of thing, to understand that his stomach felt better and he calmed down. There was a video, well, now it's been a month or so, about this kid with autism, and everybody was oohing and ahhing over the knowledge that this kid had. But the problem that I had with it was this kid talked so fast, and his repetitive behavior, and he was so high strung, and he had, and that isn't something in my eyes, to celebrate. Because I know that with Kruse's protocols and that sort of thing, the kid would have been able to center himself and calm down, and Ryan's repetitive behaviors were pretty much wiped out.
And I think that's something that's important to talk about, is when we talk about food's a component to help, food is the signals that tells your body what hormones need to be made. I mean, it's really a hormonal signal, is when you think about it. What you eat, and when you eat it in the right season, it tells your body what time it is in the circle of life, and that's really important.
What's the first thing that as moms we want our kids to do? Is sleep through the night,
right?
And so the first thing that goes through my mind is the body has to learn differences between night and day. And then the next thing in my mind is the seasons, right?
Yep.
And so once you get those two things on track, it aligns everything. Again, that's my own comprehension of my experience. So yes, again, the food was first, and then we got a phone call from Ryan's teacher. And said, how's Ryan doing at home? And I said, well, what kind of phone call is this? Do I need to come pick him up? Or is he in trouble? Is he, I've had phone calls where, yeah, your kid is on the ground screaming and, is completely off the walls today. And it's not doing him any good to really be here, and do you want to come pick them up, or do you want us to deal with it? So I was expecting that to be the phone call, and this is a couple weeks into the leptin
reset.
Right?
And people,
and they're like, no. We just want to know how he's doing at home, and I'm like, oh, he comes home, he's happy, he's smiling, he's doing well, and they're like, oh, well, what are you doing different? And I'm like, what? Well, we're doing a few things different. Why? Because we mainstreamed him. That's where he wants to be in a general ed classroom, and he's not participating, but he's just observing. And we're kind of interested in why,
what's changed.
We're going from a kid who melts down every day and is just, so hyper and hard to calm down and won't pay attention and this sort of thing, to a calm kid that's starting to kind of observe the world around him. And I said, yeah, that's kind of a long story, and you'd think I'm like,
Crazy.
But the number one question is, what did we see first kind of change? The ultimate thing that we saw change first was that he calmed down and he started sleeping through the night. Now, we talked about...
He's 5 at this point, correct?
4.5, almost 5. Yeah. It was kindergarten. He was in the autism centered based program, and then at the very end of kindergarten, they mainstreamed him.
So, I mean, that's really, when you think about it, I mean, sleep is really important for everybody. But, I mean, children sleep so much more than us. And when they start sleeping through the night, they begin to make cognitive changes, and they begin to actually repair.
And Ryan was the kid that got up at midnight and 4 every single night to just move. And I, through this journey, did not sleep. And I think that had a lot to do with my weight gain and so on and so forth, in addition to, running medications, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, those are the two main things that we saw change first. And Ryan, even though he had, very, very little language, he understood what we were doing. Like, he understood, he felt better. And even though he, tested the waters a few times, he will not, he doesn't test the waters anymore. He gets it.
Right. And so for people who aren't familiar with Jack's leptin prescription, it basically starts with the big ass breakfast, a high fat, high protein breakfast. And depending on who you are, you may move higher protein, but and with kids it's a little different. You kind of have to adjust based upon how they respond to a high protein, high fat breakfast. But as an adult, you're eating 50 grams of protein with fat. There are no carbs in that breakfast. Greens, but not your starchy, not your sweet carbs. And then you eat 4 hours after that, lunch. And then you eat 3 to 4 hours after that, but no later than 7 o'clock in the evening. And you want to eat, in the wintertime, you want to eat before the sun goes down, in reality. So you're eating with the light. And I think that's really important. You have to eat with the light. When the light is up, you eat. So when the sun is awake, you eat. Yeah. When the sun goes to bed, you stop eating. And, I have to say that it's I've gotten to the point where I can not eat that big ass breakfast. But I find that on stressful days, when I know I'm going to have a stressful day, I do that big ass breakfast. And I think one of the keys is when I started a leptin reset, every meal was eggs and seafood for breakfast. It was a salmon burger or herring or sardines or smoked oysters and eggs and maybe a side of bacon. And I remember when I first started, I could barely eat it. I felt so full. I felt, ugh.
And that's
but you see a change.
Yeah, and that's the major key to weight loss is timing of your meals and how clean you eat.
And it's the same thing for behavior in kids.
It is. Very, very much so.
We've been a little more loose with the kids on their eating just to see how they would self-regulate this summer. And we have truly discovered that 6 o'clock, feed me, I'm hungry, I can't wait anymore meltdown is directly related to how big that breakfast was in the morning. Yeah. We do, and we're not as strict as you are, but we don't have some of the issues you have. So my husband does what he calls French toast eggs. So it's just eggs with the makings of French toast and cooked up as, scrambled eggs. You know, a little bit of maple syrup or on top of that, and French toast eggs. Kids love it. Not everybody can do that. But we also will do eggnog for breakfast. You know, fresh eggnog with heavy cream and 3 or 4 eggs. And when we do breakfasts like that 5:30, 6 o'clock meltdown when we pick them up after school is not present. And they've also not finished their lunch. So if they are hungry, they have food they can go eat while I'm making dinner.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that timing is so key. I think the timing is just as is more important when you're dealing with children who have medical issues, is more important than necessarily the type of the quality of food, not necessarily the type, but the quality of food.
Yeah. And, you know, and then at the same time, right around when we changed the food for the kids, okay, granted that was, you know, a good 5-6 months into my journey. We changed the food, we changed our light bulbs to the amber and orange lights. We started wearing the blue blockers.
I think we got to stop and talk about the amber lights and the blue blockers. You and I are very familiar with this. There are going to be people who end up watching this who think we're crazy. My amber glasses are downstairs. I actually have prescription-made amber glasses that I wear inside when I'm at client sites, when I'm in fluorescent lighting.
Do you want me to get mine?
Yeah, grab yours.
Okay, yeah. One
second. I should have been thinking.
I know.
You know what? You never think about these things in the time period. But while Kate gets the orange glasses, and the glasses she's going to bring up are very similar to the glasses I started out with. But orange glasses blocks blue light. Blue light is the signal that tells your body what to do. The problem is that in today's world, we spend all day in artificial light. We look at computers all day. Many of us spend our days at work, at school, working with computers. We're under artificial fluorescent lighting. We watch TV all day long, all those things. And that actually sends the wrong signal to the brain. Blue light is supposed to be most prevalent during summer. Whether you're summer in the northern hemisphere or summer in the southern hemisphere. You're supposed to get the most blue light during the day from the sun. The problem is we get blue light not from the sun. And there are people who are blue light sensitive. I'm one of those people. I get migraines when I'm in artificial lighting. And that artificial lighting causes a trigger through the retina, which causes a problem. So Kate's going to put on her glasses. These are the glasses. I wear a prescription version of these. I call them my fashion-forward blue blockers. And when I was working in the Pentagon, I walked around in them, and everybody's like, what are you wearing those for? I'm like, well, when I wear these, I don't get migraines, like I was getting daily migraines when I worked in the building. And it's crazy. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah, I don't get migraines. I'm a better, more productive worker. I'm happier. I'm a better mom. I'm a better wife. I'm a better employee. And I'm more productive for my clients. And people are like, wow, that's crazy. So I wear my freak flag continuously. I wear my blue blockers when I am in any type of artificial lighting environment. This is my home office. It's a total wreck. I don't turn on the lights when I am in here. I use lighting from outside when I am working. I don't turn on artificial lights. We have fluorescent lighting in our house. We don't turn it on. We're actually waiting for, we've got to call into an electrician, and we just keep missing each other. We've been trying to work schedules for 6 months now to get to have him come in and remove all the fluorescent lights and or change them to LED lighting. We've put in solar tubes, which it's a reflective mirror that catches and distributes natural light. We don't turn lights on at night.
We use a lot of candles, to be honest, and as you know, we went back to the non-fluorescent incandescent lights. We do not use LED or
halogen. Compact fluorescent.
Yeah.
And we've slowly
we had to switch things out.
Right. At our old house, we had old wiring, and the old wiring would blow out a compact fluorescent in less time than an incandescent. So we never really bought those. So those were never in our house. But we did have halogen lights, and I always hated them. Our new house does have some fluorescents. We use incandescents primarily. We're slowly converting to LEDs, but most of the time we wear orange glasses and we use red headlamps at night. We have a red night light we have for the kids in the hallway, so if they do happen to get up, our youngest Havoc is working on night training, so he may get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. Yeah. They've got a light, but it's red. And I think that's really important. You know, people think you're crazy because you do weird things. I have a stand-up desk at my office after badgering my office for one. I wear my orange glasses, and people are like, why? And when I explain it to them, they go, oh, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's amazing watching the change in the wintertime, especially. I don't use the orange glasses with the kids in the summertime unless we're going to watch a movie that's a little bit late at night. You know, it's like 7 o'clock. We'll put the orange glasses on. So even though it's light out, they can watch the movie and not be too overly stimulated by the movie. And that light, managing that light, I think is really, really important just for everybody. But if you're dealing with something where you have a medical condition that is impacted by light, and they're more and more discovering that a lot of diseases are the result of a circadian mismatch. And that's it. Right. So if you fix the light problem and some of the other forms of electromagnetic energy that it's the light you can't see, if you fix that, you can reverse disease. Yeah.
And you know, that kind of goes into grounding and going outside barefoot. And you know, every morning the kids and I kind of go outside, and you know, we spend time in the morning sun, and we go to our garden. That's our favorite thing to do right now, is because our garden is blooming and things are growing. And but we do spend a lot of time outdoors and pairing our feet with the ground. And you know, so we kind of made a lot of huge changes with our kids. You know, we talked about light and the iPads and, you know, things and, you know, grounding and that sort of thing. But some of the other things that I forgot to mention in the first video podcast thing was, you know, not only did we go through, you know, our foods and that sort of thing, but we went through everything from cleaning supplies to body soaps to shampoos to, you know, what around us in our house. And we cleaned the slate. Like the majority of our house, vinegar cleans everything. Vinegar makes me, you know.
I'm partial to vinegar and Blue Dawn. That stuff is awesome.
Yeah.
Blue Dawn and vinegar works as a bug spray. It works as a cleaner. throw a little Epsom salts in, and you've got a weed killer. I mean,
speaking of 4th of July and fireworks and stuff, how does that work as bug spray? Dawn and...
Oh, well, it works as bug spray for the garden.
Oh.
You put it on your plants. Dawn and vinegar, you can spray it on, and it will kill the bugs. And we have it done like you can do. What you do is you take some water, and you soak garlic, cayenne pepper, and onions overnight and make like a solution, and then you strain out the stuff, and then you mix that with vinegar, Dawn, and water, and it will kill all the bad pests, and it will kill all bugs in your garden, including your good pests.
We'll talk more about that later.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a little side.
So at any rate, this, the school was really baffled by what we did, and they kind of came back at the very end of the year. So this was April, May, June. They came back to me in June and said, we need you to come in, and we need to kind of go through his goals and that sort of thing. And okay, whatever. And so I came in, and they said, no. You're here. Now you're going to explain this to us, because in 3 months we were educationally caught him up. We mainstreamed him. He's calm. So now you're going to tell us. You're not allowed to leave until you tell us. And I looked them square in the eye, and I explained it. And they're like, yeah, you belong in a nut house. Have a nice day.
No. Well, and that's the thing is when you tell people, I've healed some of my own stuff. I've reversed some issues with my kids, following Jack's protocols. When I tell people I get in a cold tank of water and I sit in it for 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes longer, depending on how cold or not cold it is. They think I'm nuts. Why would you want to do that? Well, I want to reverse disease. I want to live a longer, more fuller life in the time I have, whatever that time period is. And yeah, I mean...
Let's talk about CT for a minute, because CT is a very important part of this puzzle along with light. Ryan was the kid that I think instinctively knew that that's what his body needed. From birth, he would not touch warm or even slightly warm water. He had to have cold showers and have to have cold baths. And he loved cold baths. This was the kid that loved it. And I'm like sitting here like, oh God, that's insane. Because it was like the tap cold water where you're like, that's even too cold to drink, Ryan. What he's like testing the water. He's like, this
is perfect. And it's interesting because my kids will CT in the summertime, but getting them to do it in the wintertime is like teeth.
Well, here in Michigan we have major snowfall, so we go outside without coats and whatever on and that sort of thing. Now, people will come back to me if this is part of the supercharged film and say, what's the deal? When we taped Supercharge, okay, it was below zero with 40-mile-an-hour gusts of wind. And my kids were like, we'll go outside, but there's no way we are doing this without our coats. And I felt so, but I went out there and I was like, this is like summertime, yay! But you can see, like, when I'm throwing, we had a snowball fight and that sort of thing that, like, I would throw the snowball, and the snowball just, like, pff, it didn't even make it.
Right.
Because the gust of winds just, pff.
Well, but, and I think when you talk about cold does something, and Jack Kruse is really good at talking about this. Cold condenses. Cold conducts electricity in the body better. So when you pair that with grounding, you know, and a lot of people sit there, oh, grounding's poo-poo, it's some woo. And and I will tell you, you've got to try this. And if you've never done it, just put your feet in a cold bucket of ice water for 10, 15 minutes. And then go stand on the ground, the bare grass, and you will feel different. You won't be able to describe what you feel, but you know you will feel different.
Pure awesomeness.
I mean, and it's one of those things. It's like I go through fits and phases of CTing where I really want to CT and I CT daily, and then I go through phases where I can't CT. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I think your body.
And when you trust, and I think that's the hardest thing for a lot of people, and it's hard for moms to trust what their kids are telling them as far as how they feel. And you know, if you trust your body, if you listen to that internal voice, that internal guide, you will know what is right at the right time based upon following the Leptin protocol and doing it. I will tell you that before I did the Leptin protocol, my internal sensor, my GPS, it was off. And when that's off, you lose confidence about what your internal voice is telling you.
Yeah.
And so moms out there, you know, reconnect with that internal voice. You know what's right for your kids, but also trust the internal voice that your kids are telling you. I mean, my kids, we have an iPad. I don't know where it is because I never know where it is. I have one.
Okay.
It isn't charged. The last time I charged it so we could go on a plane trip, and I broke it.
You might as well, because
and you know, we got the iPad so the kids would have a video to watch, so they would be complacent on the plane. Because if you've ever traveled 8 hours on a plane with kids, it's not fun. It's not fun for your seatmates. It's not fun for everybody. But that thing breaking was the best thing that ever happened to us. And my kids don't play on our phones. My kids don't get any computer time. They will get kids shows on the weekends for an hour or two, or we'll go to a movie. We don't go to movies all that often because movies are freaking expensive. But we will go. They will get to do that on the occasion. And the reality is my kids learn more and experience more by me sending them outside to play. And we say go climb a tree.
You know, kids will never remember the best day of their, watching TV.
No, they won't.
Remember the best day of, climbing the tree, or, the time that we go on nature trails and spend time together, and they'll never, it's just lost, wasted time in my view. But at any rate, once we got CT and grounding in place and that sort of thing, we went through the major boot camp where Jack Kruse had, the EMF.
The EMF boot camp, yeah.
They had a ton of different doctors and specialists come with it too. But about that time, we bought the meters, and we're in this tiny apartment, and we were like, oh, we gotta move. This is insane readings. So we moved to a townhome because we thought that the only type of housing that we could afford was an apartment or a townhouse or something like that. And
So I'm going to ask you, when you did your readings, and I think I've got one of my readers. I borrowed another one. I've got a trifield meter.
Uh-huh.
This is the one I started with. I borrowed one of the members on Jack's forum. Her handle is Can't Wait. She lives just down the way from me now. I borrowed her Alpha UHS milligauss meter to test our house. And I did the EMF boot camp just like Kate and learned that childhood leukemias are associated with rates of 2 milligauss or more. Mm-hmm. What were the readings you had in your house?
They were insane.
I mean,
I wish Kruse was home because that was when I really thought that Jack and my husband were completely insane. Because when you think about EMF and that sort of thing, it's like something you can't physically see.
You can't see it, you can't feel it, you can't touch it, you can't taste it.
It's not a fully grasped concept.
Right.
But what I can tell you is when we had the meters, the first thing we did was the microwave went. Our Wi-Fi was completely shut off. We hardwired everything. The iPad went, the TV went. And I can tell you that in a very short amount of time, Ryan in particular, he stopped screaming. I think that instinctively or whatever, it was part of his issues with his body that even, I want to go as far as he could hear it. He just, it took some time. It wasn't an overnight thing, but I mean, a short amount of time, he quickly, cognitively jumped. And I think with all these things together, with the food and the grounding and the CT and starting into the EMF realm of things.
I think when we talk about EMF, what people don't understand is electromagnetic frequencies include light. Electromagnetic frequencies, it's this huge range of frequencies, and light is just a very, 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 very small component. I mean, and I think that's where Ruben's speciality is he understands that light spectrum within the larger electromagnetic spectrum, and he understands the larger electromagnetic spectrum, which is why he's able to hack light so effectively and so efficiently. I'm really looking forward to when the Quantlet bracelet comes out and really what it is and how it works and how I can use it. But light's just this small component of the electromagnetic frequencies, and we don't think about light in that terms. And it's a frequency, it's electromagnetic, it influences us, but there are things outside light that we can't see that do the exact same thing. Our cell phones, our computers. When I got the tri-field meter and I started testing with it, at all the 4 readings, it topped out over 100 in my house. And I was like, well, what does this mean? And I started researching, and Christy let me borrow her meter, and I started walking around and testing. The best reading I got in my house was outside, 2 milligauss. My house, even where we were sleeping, was above 2 milligauss. Where the kids were sleeping, it was over 200 milligauss.
In our apartment, our bedroom was on an outside wall, and our bed was up against this outside wall, and just below us, because we were on a second story, just below us were all the meters.
Yep.
And I can tell you that it was above 80 where our heads were. Uh,
Our meter was directly on the wall of the rooms where the kids' beds were, and in that wall registered over 200 milligauss. When I went outside and read the meter, it was over 750 milligauss. It scared the living crap out of me.
Yeah, and we quickly moved. We did not waste any time. We moved. We moved into a townhome where, we had neighbors on either side, but it was less crowded overall.
Right.
And we took our meters when we saw the townhome and that sort of thing, and it was a way better situation, but not where we wanted to be.
And I think that's important, that people need to understand that when you're dealing with mitigating your environment to improve health, it doesn't happen overnight.
It's a journey.
Because the majority of us can't just go, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to move. We have bills to pay. We have commitments that we've acquired. We have schools that our kids in that are providing services. It took us, when we realized how bad our house was, the first time around, my husband's like, okay, we'll move. We got the agreement. And it still took us a year and a half to actually get the house ready, get it on the market, get it sold, and then another 6 weeks to find something that met our requirements. And, my cell phone, I get 1 bar at my house. I get 3 bars if I lean out my office window here. I literally have to be touching the aluminum on the window frame and leaning almost leaning into the screen to get a good reception. We specifically looked for that. I know so many people goes, well, I couldn't live without Wi-Fi. We lived without Wi-Fi I lived without Wi-Fi for 30 some odd years before it came into my life. And I've been Wi-Fi free, not counting work, Wi-Fi free in my home for 3 years now. Mm-hmm. And everything is hardwired. And guess what? When I needed to be on the computer, I'm in my office. The rest of the time, I'm not in my office. I'm not on the computer. It's a conscious decision to put the electronics in one location. Did you ever flip the breakers?
Yes. So we moved into this townhome, which was a way better situation all the way around. And then we started thinking about the breakers and that sort of thing, and the breakers were not labeled. So we went through, we had to go
Let's see
through.
What's this one? Yeah.
Yeah. We had to go through, and that was, the shortcut is we took a radio type thing and plug it in and then figure out what breaker was what. And it was a big pain in the ass. But we realized that the major breakers that we needed to turn off. How
did Ryan and Lizzie improve when you started turning the breakers off at night? Did you see bigger improvements?
Yeah. We saw major improvements with that. And right about that time is when we got our tax return and bought the Magneticos.
I love my Magneticos. That's the best thing ever.
I know. It is. And we knew that financially we were going to be in trouble doing it, but we did it anyways. We're like, we're just
there. And I think that's when you talk about health and you talk about finances, and financial issues bring about stress. No ifs, ands, or buts. Mm-hmm. But sometimes there are solid things that you want to do that help your health that require an investment, and it's worth every freaking penny.
It is.
I mean, when I first got the Magneticos, Jack did not have his arrangement with the Magnetico company for the percentage off. I called them and I said, this is what I want to buy. And I can't afford a cash payment. Can you do a plan with me? And they worked out a 12-month plan. And I paid it off every month. That's how I did it. And, you know, the kids both have 20 Gauss pads, and we have a 20 Gauss pad. And I notice a difference when I sleep on that.
Yeah. And especially with Lizzie, who, you know, her autism is so mild. But when we started seeing sleep changes in her, especially with the Magnetico, you could tell a clear difference that her internal batteries were recharging every night. And I mean, it was crystal clear change in her. With Ryan, it took some getting used to. He couldn't explain to us the sensation, but if I had to guess, it was like that tingling type sensation for him, which was a sensory thing. But he, again, started to sleep better and again recharge his.
Now, you keep talking about recharging batteries, and I think we got to stop and talk about that for a second, because most of the time when you think about recharging your batteries, you're like, oh, my cell phone's dead, my computer's dead, I'm going to plug it in and charge it. We forget that animals are electric beings themselves. When we are unplugged, so to speak, from nature, from our environment, we discharge our battery. So when you get, when you get sick, people say, oh, I feel run down. When they're stressed, oh, I feel run down. I feel wiped out. I feel drained. When you think about that, people, when they talk about not feeling well, they talk in terms of they're not charged. Their battery isn't charged, but we don't treat our bodies like they need the charge. And there's a couple ways to get charge. The most obvious one is through food. And a lot of people equate recharging, I've got a
better food. Yeah,
I've got that 4 p.m. slump. I got the nods in the office where I'm falling asleep. I need some caffeine to recharge me. I need some sugar for a pick-me-up. Those are how most people think about recharging their battery, through food, through caffeine, through soda.
First thing that I mentioned in my journey, in the you can go back to the first podcast that I did with Ruben, is the first thing that I said was, I'm exhausted. I was exhausted. I had to have my nap at 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock because my body literally shut down. And with autism, it's magnified to a great extent, in terms of energy pathways and that sort of thing.
So we think about food's one way to recharge your battery, but it's not the only way. And I think that's where grounding comes in. Grounding is a way when you connect with the earth, whether you're sitting on the ground or you sit on a rock, you put your feet in the grass, you lay on the grass, you are absorbing energy from the earth. Sun is another way to recharge your battery. We've become so fearful of sun. I don't want to get skin cancer and I don't want to burn, but you need that vitamin D that you get from your skin makes vitamin D and a bunch of other hormones. and it can only do it when it's exposed to the sun. Now, there's certain times you want to be in the sun, and there's certain times you don't.
Right.
The ideal times are from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m., and then from 3 p.m. to sunset. Winter, that obviously shortens. But like, I don't know if you do this, but when my kids are bad, I have timeout rocks, and I make them go sit out on the timeout rock. And guess what? The behavior resolves amazingly. Their little bare butts are on that uncomfortable little rock, and they sit out there. And by the time I'm ready to, by the time I've given them like 5-10 minutes, they don't want to leave the timeout rock. They're like, oh no, I'm not coming in. I'm like, fine, you can sit there all you want, but you're at a timeout. And I found that it's an amazing way for them to collect energy and to recenter themselves as a mom.
Yeah. Yeah. And even moms need their timeouts too. I put myself in
timeout. But here's something that, and this is where I think CT needs to be brought back into the picture. CT, getting in cold water or dunking your face in cold water or taking a cold shower conserves the battery. So you're saving your energy. It's another way to save the energy you've got. And, I've got coworkers who think I'm just crazy because I sit in a cold tank of water, or because I wear the cool fat burner and gut buster while I commute into the office and commute home. They think I'm nuts. And yes, I am nuts. I admit my crazy. But you know what? I feel better when I do that. I don't feel drained at the end of a really bad day at work. I feel like, yeah, it was a bad day, but I feel great. I can interact with my kids. I can interact with my husband, and I'm not a bear. And if it does that for me, I can imagine that it's even more powerful for someone who has autism. It is my thoughts.
Yeah. It's definitely magnified. A lot of things are magnified, but it goes back to the journey and changing things over time. And what I would have to say, I would say in the last year that, grounding and light, something clicked upstairs about it, because we started to really see Ryan come out of his shell. And right before we moved, Ryan was outside without his shoes on, and he was standing in the grass. And our next door neighbor, Jeff, was outside smoking a cigarette or whatever. And Ryan's like, Mr. Jeff, you need to come out here and take off your shoes and socks and collect electrons with me. And I peeked out the front door to see who my son was talking to, because mommy antenna's like, ding, like,
right.
And Jeff turns to me and he goes, the 2 years that you've lived next to me, Ryan has, ignored me. He's never spoken a word to me. And that's what he chooses to say to me, is come collect electrons with me. What does that even mean?
Well, I love your story. I love the story of, of what has happened with Ryan at the end of the school year.
Yeah.
I love that story, and I think you need to talk about it, because it really shows that when you incorporate there's a component that may be missing, and that he exemplifies how to capture that component.
Right. So kind of going back to our journey, he got mainstreamed at the end of kindergarten, and then during first grade parent-teacher conferences about November, so that's good 6-8 months or whatever.
Right.
they sat down and explained to me that he was starting to raise his hand, and they said anytime he raises his hand, we call on him for him to answer the questions, because he's starting to kind of come out of his shell. Now he's still parallel playing, but
he's starting to participate.
Yeah, which is huge. And by the end of the year, he, we were seeing more and more language. And then I had my surgery, and I wasn't sure how Ryan was going to react.
Right.
And because it's out of his routine, and even though autism, people like things the same. They don't like change. And so we weren't really sure, and sure enough, he braced through it. And at the end of surgery, we started to realize how much he has gained over time. Now, between when we started Kruse, we couldn't afford therapy. We couldn't afford it. And we're like, well, we'll put therapy on the side, and we'll work on the diet, and we'll work on, different things, and we'll see what happens. So we stopped all therapy. So after surgery, it's been 2 years, and we decided he has made incredible gains, but X, Y, and Z, we're still behind on.
Right.
And so Blue Cross Blue Shield made us go through a third diagnosis. And even though the autism piece of things didn't change, but we jumped so far cognitively that the response was insane.
So where was Ryan before cognitively starting Jack Kruse, the protocols, the leptin reset, minding circadian cycles, eliminating non-native EMF, and allowing Ryan to incorporate the CT he wanted to do?
Sure. So you imagine a bell curve, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in the middle, you got your average Joe Schmo, right?
Right.
Average, and of course there's like a middle mean either
right.
direction, right? Okay, so to one side you have, so you have average, then you have below average, and then extremely below average. Okay, I don't care about labels. You can kill me over it later. Okay, so again, the other side, you have average, and then on the other side you have above average and gifted.
Right.
Whatever the label really is. I'm just gonna, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so most of Ryan was 2 notches below thing, and the majority of him was just below average.
Right.
Okay, so
he's at the bottom end of the scale.
Right. We jumped to the high end of average to above average.
That's amazing. And how many years was that?
2.5 years.
2.5 years of
no therapy.
Big ass breakfasts, minding light, grounding, CT, and the only services he received was from
the
school district.
Now here's my disclaimer. Okay, friends. My big disclaimer is that therapists and schools is still part of this journey. But
you financially weren't going to be able to afford therapy as it was. So right. you were kind of going, well, we can't afford therapy. So what else do we have to lose?
Right.
That was your choice.
And we didn't expect any of these changes. Okay, we didn't expect any of this to happen. Our goal was, hey, Mom lost a lot of weight, and this is really good for us, and here we are. So in the beginning, we didn't think there was going to be all of these changes with with the autism and that sort of thing. But the thing is about this is that, you know, after all of this time, you know, and we jumped cognitively, we said therapy is going to be so much more successful now that we have the energy pathways working and reconnecting and connecting. So I want people to understand that, yes, getting your pathways to work and whatever, great, but you still have to fill in those skills and those gaps.
Right. And so this just allows, having rebuilt those energy pathways for Ryan and for Lizzie, what that has done is that now makes them more available to reap benefits from the therapy.
Correct.
It's not like you could sit there and say, oh, this is all you need to do.
Right.
No, you need to do. You need to do the leptin reset. You need to do the minding circadian cycles. You need to do the CT. You need to do the grounding. You need to be connected with your environment and disconnected from, you know, the electronic environment, which is not really an environment at all. It's a placeholder for something we're missing. And by doing those things, you open up new opportunities for therapies and services to reach in and help open the world.
Yeah. And so we put Ryan back into now the mandate for insurance is now in full effect and that sort of thing. So we were able to put Ryan back into therapy, and it's been, 5-6 months. And technically we could discharge him from therapies now, but we're going through the summer. And at the end of summer, he will be fully discharged from therapies. And I'm not quite sure we have enough boxes to check off to have the autism label anymore with Ryan.
Oh, wow.
And Lizzie definitely does not qualify for the diagnosis anymore.
That's really amazing. By, you know, when we stop and we think about disease or dysfunction, I think we're slowly coming to the discovery that a lot of diseases and dysfunction really, they start in the brain, but they may manifest elsewhere. And that...
It's all... Look, Gretchen, between our, how many hours now? It's like both days are
2 gallons of water gone. And I have not had the same amount of water as you have. I have it's really interesting. We'll get to water in another moment. But, I sit and we don't, I think we're really truly starting to understand, and science is starting to understand, that how our bodies work. If the brain is not properly wired and properly functioning, you're not going to get a body that works properly. You become obese. You have hormonal problems. You have skin issues. You have issues, and translating how you fix an adult is, translating how you fix yourself as a mom to how to fix your child. It's so boggling and it's so frustrating. And I think so many moms and dads, they just want their child to be happy. They just want their child to succeed. They just want their child to be able to experience life and without being filtered in any way, shape, or form.
And that's a really important part. It's not that, the idea of curing autism, I hate that. because that's not the goal. It's autism has to be understood, and especially at the rate that it's cranking out.
Right.
But you know,
is driving
but
that?
hit it home with the idea that we want to remove the obstacles that are going to be in his way to be a successful adult and to be able to function and you know, in a very in a way that is emotionally, mentally, physically healthy. And you know, it's not that I want Ryan to change his personality or who he is, or, you know, Ryan is like the coolest kid. He's just awesome. He comes up with he's just amazing and incredibly smart. Did you know that it was really funny that not even 30 minutes, do you remember Jack talking about the hexagon on Saturn?
Yes.
Okay, 30 minutes before that post and that article and that whole kit and caboodle, Ryan pointed that out to me. It kind of creeped me out.
He's a smart kid.
Mom!
And, you know, he's got an amazing
Did you know? And I'm like, whoa.
He's
whoa.
amazingly attuned. I mean, it's like he's gonna discover new worlds with his with his fascination with astronomy and space and what's out there.
Yeah, and okay, so you asked me a very to tell the story about the end of this school year. Okay, so we bought a house this spring, and we had to switch school districts, and that meant that 2 months before the end of school, I had to stick Ryan in a new district and really start from scratch, right?
Right.
So a week or so into the new school, Ryan has an aide in the class, but the purpose of the aide is to make sure that he's comfortable and not be right over his shoulder or have to hold hands or whatever.
Right.
But the thing is that Ryan would get up from his seat, and every classroom had a door to the outside because the shape of the building, that fire
codes and everything. Right.
Codes
So he's getting up in the middle of class and just going
to look outside. And his aide came over and, what's going on, dude? And Ryan just, for the longest time, would just sit and look outside. And a few days of this went on, and finally Ryan asked he's like, I want to go outside and sit in the grass. That's all I want to do right now. And so the aide was like, you just want to sit in the grass. And
That's it.
Yeah, I am really tired and my battery is low. And I had a smile from ear to ear when they were telling me this story in his IEP. And so they allowed Ryan to go, and he sat down. And luckily he was wearing shorts because they didn't like the idea of him taking off his socks and shoes because liability, blah, 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 blah. But, and they started to chart how calm and collected, and the biggest thing with Ryan, how long he can stay focused. And so what they did was they have a key ring with lots of sensory choices for him. And they put going outside and sitting on the grass as one of the choices. And it's a huge win for me that they have allowed him to do this. And apparently he got a small group of boys to do this at recess too. And I just thought that was like the coolest thing. Well, then they're like, so, Ryan, can you explain this to me? And he's like, oh, I'm collecting electrons and it recharges my battery so I feel better. And that's how he explained it. And his aide went back and Googled what he was saying. And Ryan even pointed out that it's the chain of electrons in the mitochondria. And I'm like, look, oh, I am just like, at this point, I had like tears and I was laughing and crying. And the school's like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm good.
But it goes to show that there's so many.
But it was interesting.
There's so many things that are out there as labeled as woo, as witch doctor, as nutty, and you sit down and we dismiss. Some of those should be dismissed, regardless of what your medical illness is or anything. But then there are others that you sit down and you go, but the science backs it up when you look at it as a system. But the problem is we don't look at ourselves as part of the system that is the environment here on Earth. We think as you said earlier, humans, we fuck it up.
But what gets me is that the school A allowed this, but B, they charted it. They plotted it out to good days and bad days, and they there was days where it was rainy and
if they're seeing success, they want to know what is it that's driving success. We have this one child. We have one child who is progressing as no other child has done before. What is different? And so it takes people asking those questions, because when you have the label of autism, or the label of PCOS, or the label of type 2 diabetes, whatever your label is, when you suddenly start making changes, and those changes equal success, the question then comes, is that an N equals 1, which everybody in the paleo sphere talks about your own personal context. Jack talks about your own personal thunderstorm. My environment and my successes are different from yours because of where I live, who I am, and my own issues. But the question is, are there constants that everybody can apply that can result in similar success? Maybe not on the track of success that Ryan has had or that Izzy has had, but something that they can sit there and go, remember last year Ryan kept wanting to go outside? Why don't we do some, what would happen if we took nice days and took 30 minutes out of our day and taught a portion of class outside with our autism spectrum disorder kids? What would happen if you asked that question and you applied that question?
Dreaming and wishful thinking.
I mean, there is a school and they're all over the U.S. We have one in Virginia. It's called the Waldorf School, and the Waldorf School, the lessons are taught outside. Rain, sleet, snow, shine. Classes outside.
I wish.
There is no inside in Waldorf. As much as I would love to afford to go to the Waldorf School here in Virginia, it's like $40,000 a year for just like 3 days a week. I can't afford that. That's a freaking college loan for in-state tuition at this point. And you sit there and go, what? I mean, our school system, everybody's entitled to an education, and it's really great. But I learned something when I was struggling with math, with calculus in college. I had a very awesome instructor whose kids were all special education children. And this man tried everything to get me to understand math. I mean, he stood on his head one day and taught me math because he understood that not everyone learns the same way. Not everyone focuses the same way. And what would happen if we actually took that and applied that to, I'd love to see our school district take my kids' class and just do outside class with them. 5 days. I'd take 2 days a week if I could get it. I'd really love it 5 days a week. I think you'd have better education. I think you'd have better test scores. Instead, we focus on the wrong things.
We do. And that in particular with autism, in the autism communities, we do focus on the wrong things completely. There was one forum post in the quantum group that just, I got so frustrated. I'm like, is anyone listening to me? Kind of thing, because we have gone completely off course with where we need to be having these conversations. Because
that I remember that post, and that post was we were ignoring the energy impacts.
It was one hell of a post.
When you talk about focusing on the wrong things, sometimes in focusing on the wrong things, we end up, people in their desperation to find a solution, end up pursuing off-the-wall treatments. And I'm not talking like, we all say Jack's crazy. Jack is crazy, but I'm telling you, crazy works. I mean, I've healed some things that I've been told are not healable. Myself, following Jack's protocols. And so I'm not talking Jack kind of crazy. I'm talking off the wall. What are some of the off the wall things that people are pursuing that might be dangerous?
There's a few out there that I feel are completely insane. Okay, so there's a treatment out there called MMS. And basically it's two solutions, and you put it together, and then you use a droplet and you mix it either in applesauce or food, and you drink it or you consume it. And basically the gist of it is that it makes bleach. You're consuming bleach. Oh yeah, I see your face, Gretchen. Can you imagine? Oh, and there's yahoos out there that miracle cure, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
I just...
Okay.
Getting a cold bath is one thing. Eating seafood at every meal is one thing.
Consuming bleach?
I wear a red headlamp at night to make my kids' lunches. I mean, we don't turn on the lights at night. Wintertime, there ain't no lights on. I'm walking around with a red headlamp. My husband's going, I wish we had some lighting that we could use. And I'm like, well, we can get some LEDs that we can change the color, and the whole house will be red, and we can turn them on. But they're like $200. Do you want to spend the money? No. Okay, this is what we're doing. Okay, I'm crazy, but I'm crazy for doing some of the things I do, but I just
can't imagine.
I can't understand that. I have never been into a situation where I felt so desperate as a parent that I'm willing to try anything, however. So you have been in that situation and you think it's insane.
Yeah. There's other ones, but again, I think that we need to bring back the conversation of, Jack's not selling you pills. He's not, selling miracle shakes. He's not sharing. I think that what he does is completely amazing in the fact that this is information, and here you go.
Do with it what you will.
Yeah. You either have your big girl pants on.
Yeah.
And again, he's there for questions and whatever, but it's really up to you to put it into to action. And to kind of wrap this up.
Yeah, because we've been at this for like 3 hours.
But you know what, Gretchen? This is, I think, very epic because I think we hit, everything that we needed to. But we bought the house, and we're just at this point we are fixing more EMF issues here to kind of and going forward and that sort of thing. But it takes time and energy.
It does take time, and I think what's really important is, and people need to understand, this is, like you said, this is one piece of the pie. You started this specifically you're like, I'm going to get control of my health and I'm going to be healthy. You had no idea that applying these principles that Jack Kruse has laid out would change your children's lives, let alone your lives. Mm-hmm. And Jack always talks about, he tells this, everybody's familiar with the starfish story of the little boy who's standing at low tide, who's walking along the beach, and he's picking up a starfish and throwing one back. And you can't save them all, but you know what? If I throw one back and you throw one back and you throw one back, it just, more people help others. And Jack calls you his starfish. I mean, you've got a starfish necklace on. Because you're trying to change your children's lives, your husband's life, your lives, and you've made such you've had such amazing success that you just want to share. This is what I've done. It's one component that it doesn't cost you anything. It might sound crazy to disconnect from all this stuff, but what does it hurt to try it for 6 months? What does it hurt to try it for 1 year? What does it hurt? It doesn't hurt anything changing to a big ass breakfast and eating a ketogenic diet. You're gonna have. I don't know about you, but I have those days where my kids are like, I ain't eating that. And I'm like, well, I guess you're going hungry. Because I ain't making you anything else. And my kids are like, fine. They get up and they're like, I want a can of oysters. I'm like, I can deal with that. I open a can of oysters and I sit them down. I'm like, there's your dinner. There's your lunch.
There's a fork.
That's what it is. And I think that's really, really, really important. And you just want to share with people what you've done and the successes you have. You want to give people another option that, while it may not overall reduce costs in the short term, may reduce costs in the long term. And it may allow their child to become a functioning member of society. And, it comes down to, well, I know so many people say, well, I can't do that. It's not it's not whether I can or can't. It comes down to the Yoda mode, Yoda, do or do not. There is no try. And do you want success? Yes. Then you have to suck it up. It's going to be a rough ride. It's not going to be fun. There's going to be children trying to assert their wills, the temper tantrums, but you already got that. What would happen if something clicked and those temper tantrums decreased by a quarter, a half, 3/4? There's none. You can sit there, you sit there and you can be like, my life has changed in so many ways, and my fights are not the fights they used to be.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, I laugh more than I cry.
We all have those days that you're like, I didn't order this type of wine with my dinner.
Yeah, we still have our days, but if I can at least, you know, make people understand that it's worth doing, it's, you know, keep going and everything like that. But I think this is a really good place to wrap it up.
Yeah, I want to say thanks. And we're gonna we will have a Q&A with Kate. I believe we're going to be doing that with Ruben's Salinas. Ruben's going to pick up that Q&A. We may see if we might be able to figure out how to do 3 people. Maybe Ruben and I will do the Q&A together with Kate.
Yeah. Well, so, whoever does it, either way, we're gonna definitely do the Q&A because it's important and that sort of thing. But I think that, you know, the word must spread. We have to at this point.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
All right.
So well, thank you so much Kate. For doing this with me. And
I had a great
we're like,
time.
yeah, we can slam this out in an hour.
3 hours later.